If you can, take a little bit of time to dig past task ambient accent, take a little bit of time to dig past 4 cans and a fan in a bedroom or just a bunch of circles on a plan. There is a better way to do lighting. We work during the day, we build during the day, we photograph during the day, and our homeowners spend more time there at night. So we've got to figure out how to make that half of the experience, how that major, critical, important part of the experience better for them.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding ProTalk podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Fine Homebuilding contributing editor Ian Schwant. Today I am joined by David Warfel, founder of Light Can Help You. You can find the Fine Homebuilding ProTalk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. David, thanks for joining me.
Ian, it's a pleasure to be here.
So give us an overview of you and your firm's background.
Sure. Well, about 10 years ago, I had what I hope was an early midlife crisis and decided to start a new company. And I took components of my first career, which was in architecture and home building, in fact, low-income home building, where I learned how to, at least the basics of building a house. And then I added to that components from my second career, which was as a theatrical lighting designer, where I learned how to manipulate emotions and create drama with light. And then I added in a dash of my third career, which was as a college professor, where I had to learn how to simplify the complexities of light so that a hungover 19-year-old could understand it. And I put that together and created this business called Light Can Help You, which was aimed at delivering lighting design in a new way, in a more accessible, more approachable, more affordable way. And we found our way into the custom integration luxury home market. And we've just been growing like crazy ever since. And that's, so there's a little bit of the story of the Midwestern farm kid, which is what I am, but also a little bit dramatic. Put all of that together and you get Light Can Help You. That's where we are.
Where did you do theatrical lighting?
So I was based in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, and taught at the University of Illinois for years, and worked out of there for most of my career. And most of my theatrical work was either in Chicago, the Library Theater, and then the Organic Theater in Chicago, and then down in St. Louis at the St. Louis Black Rep. So mostly Midwestern. Did have one shot with my name on the billboard at Carnegie Hall, but mostly smaller theaters.
How does the lighting of a theatrical set relate to the lighting of a home?
Well, that's a good question. And so, most of the plays that are out there are actually taking place. They're set inside of a home or a restaurant or a bar or whatever. So oftentimes on stage, what you'll see is an approximation of real life. So I have to make it look like a real home. And if you try to make it look like a real home on stage without using architectural lighting, with only using stage lighting, then it's fake, right? But when you start to put the architectural lighting on stage in those homes or in those, cafes or whatever, it starts to look more realistic. So we're really taking reality and then amplifying it a bit on stage. So it was a real blend of both.
I know we didn't plan on getting into the stagecraft part of your background too much, but is there any particular theatrical production you've done that was exceptionally difficult to light properly?
Productions that are difficult to light properly. Well, I would say, one of the first that I really relied on architectural lighting, and the name of it is actually escaping me now, but we did it at the Organic Theater, and the set was the inside of a house, and it was shoved up against the proscenium, the front of the stage, and it had a balcony on it. So there was almost no capability to get lights, which are usually hung above the stage, into the main playing area. Like I almost couldn't use any of the regular theatrical lights. And that one really forced me to use all kinds of architectural lighting, track lights, recess lights, wall sconces, all kinds of things. And it turned out really well, but it was like, okay, now I have to do this in a different way. I couldn't use the tools that were designed to be used there. And that was a challenge, but also fun.
Yeah. You've written extensively on your blog about how light can help us and how it's important to many aspects of our daily lives. And in one post, you also included your feelings about red velvet cake, and you explored the question of why do we need light? Talk a little bit more about that and how something seemingly unrelated to architecture and light helped you think critically about where you wanted to take your third or fourth act, whatever this lighting thing is for you. I've kind of lost track.
Yeah, I've lost track too, and I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. And as I push 50, I don't think I'm growing up, so I'm just going to have to let that one go. But red velvet cake is just another analogy, another way to think about layers of light. And what I've really been exploring over the last few years is I think the reality that the way we're taught to do light, anybody who's gone through lighting training or whatnot knows there's task, ambient, accent light, these three layers of light that we need. But I've come to realize that that's really like saying good architecture, like fine home building, is achieved with 2x4s, a really good rain screen, and book matched marble slabs. Like you put those three together, and they may be useful, but they don't actually deliver a good project. And task, ambient, accent, when you put them together and you don't think about the bigger picture, they miss the point. And the point is, why do we actually need light? And over the last 20 years, this scientific discovery of how light affects the human body and the human mind and our wellness has just exploded. And so really, we shouldn't be doing lighting the same way we did when I started 20 some odd years ago. We shouldn't be doing it because we know better and we have better tools. But the homeowner, the average homeowner doesn't want to dig as deeply as we do into the science and the technology. So the red velvet cake analogy, it's just a way of saying, here's the different layers of light. And then the icing that wraps it all together is kind of the aesthetic value of a project. So you put all that together, and each of those layers has a different name, a different purpose, a different why, if you will. And that helps me train our designers on how to approach light. And then it helps us communicate with clients, with customers, in a way that they can understand and feel informed without ever using an acronym, right? That's the challenge in lighting.
But even the layers that you outline in that blog piece of do better, know more, feel better, focus clearly, change easily, tell the story, and rest deeply are interesting in and of themselves to see them related to light. Where did this idea come from when you started to think about using modern tools for lighting people's homes?
I think one of the things that you can trace through all of my various careers is a desire to take the complex, simplify it, and make it usable. So to take, and that was certainly teaching, right? It was trying to figure out, okay, here's this vast field. I have this little bit amount of time with a student. How do I make it useful to them? And that's been true. I've translated that into working with clients as well. And, I think for me, like, there was a pivotal moment when I started out in practice. I kind of left academia and I was like, okay, here I go. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to start writing because I like writing. So I just started writing and trying to figure things out. And I was like, I need to find a way to quantify what it is that we do and qualify what it is that we do. I was working through that. I had a couple of conversations with Sarah Suzanka, the author of the Not So Big series. And I was really struck by the way she created a new vocabulary for architecture, or revised, created this easy way to talk about it. And that kind of nudged me a bit in this direction. And I said, okay, well, let me figure it out. So I've been through multiple iterations. This year on the blog, I'm revising it even more. So, I talk about, one of those layers, for example, is light can help you see what you're doing so you can do it better. And I'm adding in like, well, what kind of light? Light for your hands can help you see what you're doing so you can do it better. And it starts to give us a little more idea of what are we trying to accomplish here? Where should the light be? What kind of light should it be? And why are we putting it there? And that's, I think, why the language took off. And it really transformed client conversations because they can understand they need light for their hands. But when you talk about task, ambient, accent, it's meaningless, really.
In an earlier podcast, I had a friend of mine, Luke DeBlasi, who owns a painting company in New York State that does a lot of high-end finishes. and they talked about one of the first tools that they teach their new painters to use is a headlamp, and how to think about how the headlamp is lighting what you're working, whether or not you should look at it from an angle or if you should look at it straight on, and how that affects different paints, and just even the way that you do the work. But I think lighting for your hands to do what your hands need to do is an interesting thing that I think a lot of tradespeople can identify with, and I would imagine a lot of homeowners as well.
Well, anybody who's got a shop, right, or a studio has already figured this out, at least that element of it. And, so I can understand like, oh yeah, okay, well, when you're using power tools, it's really important, right, for you to see where your hands are and what they're doing. And those other layers, each one of those has something tied to it. So like light for our bodies can help us feel better. Well, what kind of light does our body need? Our body really needs, natural light. So then how do we provide the benefits of natural light, but still allow us to work indoors, work and live indoors? So it kind of provides this overarching approach to light in our homes and in our spaces.
In that same blog series, you wrote about the absence of light and resting deeply. Talk a little bit about your background growing up in the Midwest and how you came up with this affinity for darkness and as a way to help you take in the light when the light's there showing in through your window.
I think the old saying is true. You don't really realize what you've got until it's gone. And growing up on a farm in central Illinois, I didn't realize that the darkness I enjoyed every night was fairly rare for, most folks living anywhere. Most of us live in towns. Most of us live with what's called light pollution, sky glow, city glow, this light that blots out most of the darkness. We can't see the Milky Way in town. We can only see a few stars. And I was like, what do you mean you can't see the Milky Way? Like I saw that every night. If I wanted to, go out in the summer, and it's absolutely stunning. And I didn't realize how much I'd lost, probably until I started reading articles about dark sky and ways to minimize light pollution in the way that we design lighting and the way that we build homes, et cetera. And as I put the two together, and I was like, I did have this experience once. I did have that once, and I lost it. So what can I do to at least stop making the problem worse? Because basically all electric light is some form of pollution, right? Yeah. So how do you minimize the negative impact and what that does for us and our bodies, like actually needing deep darkness? We physically need it to heal and for our brains to heal. So there's some scary research about light at night and, Alzheimer's and all kinds of just negative things that we're dealing with as humans and need to figure out how to solve.
What are some of the less than obvious ways that we humans are affected by light that you encounter in lighting design?
Well, that runs the gamut, I think. Sometimes I'll see, a research study. One that comes to mind when you mentioned that is I read a research study about how newborns do not produce their own melatonin, which is the sleep hormone that puts us to sleep at night. They get it from mother's milk, or that's essentially where they would get it historically. So depending on whether or not that's in the formula, or depending on whether or not that the milk was pumped at a different time of day, is actually going to affect the sleep of that infant. And I had a couple of kids and I never knew any of that. Like we didn't know any of that back then because we didn't know how light was affecting us. And it just like that's so from the very beginning, right, to the very end of life, in terms of, for example, with Alzheimer's and dementia, there's a phenomenon called sundowning and evening agitation. And when they do the research studies and get those folks into spaces that have light that mimics natural light, the instances of that go down and cognition goes up. Like it's irrefutable fact. And the only thing they change is light. So we realize from start to finish and basically every day, we need certain kinds of light to live healthy, good lives.
So how can a building project be improved by having someone like you or a lighting design professional on the team, and what tools do you use to work with other design professionals in this process?
Well, that's like my entire career there, Ian. That's like an unfair question, right? To say, well, what is it that
Just
you do?
explain everything that you do.
Yeah, yeah. And people will say, "What do you do that's different than on, say, the plans with that we got from the architect that has the recessed lights on it or whatever?" I say, "Well, we're probably going to use different lights. We're going to put them in different places, and we're going to illuminate different things, and you're going to get different results." So essentially, everything we do is different than what's on a typical plan. But you could boil it down to saying we're going to light vertical surfaces instead of horizontal. Primarily. So yes, we're going to light the countertops, but what we see with our eyes is straight ahead of us. That's normally where we're looking. And that's where windows go. That's where we put views. But at night, those windows turn into black mirrors. We don't see out anymore. So we need light in that zone to feel comfortable. So, how do we do that? So we use a ton of different tools like digital sketching to convey our ideas with architects and with clients. We really had to move from 2 dimensions into 3 dimensions. We had to say, I don't ever want to show a client a lighting plan because they actually have no idea what it means. And that's fine. Like, it's for construction. It's not for a homeowner. So we build 3D models and go inside and then do a digital sketching process so that they can see it in 3 dimensions. And then a client can make an informed decision, because we all have eyes and we know what we like and we don't like when we see it. But on a plan, the only thing you can say is that looks like too many lights. I mean, that's the only thing anybody can say, right? It looks like too many lights or not enough. Yeah. And we get both. We get both those comments. Yep.
One of the things I saw on your website with all of your writing was you did a series called, I think it was Do This, Don't Do This. And you had all of the different lighting things that people struggle with, like porches, kitchens, the front elevation of a house, bathrooms, and you had kind of a side-by-side of correctly lit and incorrectly lit, and you did it in a way that, like, me as somebody who's been on a lot of projects could immediately see and recognize all the don't do this options that you threw out there. Is just like the standard practice of putting can lights in soffits, which I did on my house, and just many other typical things that we as tradespeople, just like, that's the basic. Like, oh, we're going to put this amount of lights in a bedroom. We're going to put this amount of lights in a bathroom. Talk a little bit about where you got the idea to do something that stark, because I think it really jumps out when you see the visuals of those different spaces.
I think part of being a lighting designer, and someone that we were interviewing recently just said, hey, if you go into lighting, you're going into education, because nobody knows what good lighting is. I didn't know when I first started my career. I got trained as an architect. I built houses. I didn't have any clue what good lighting was, because there were so many other things I had to learn. There were so many other things that were sort of more important, right, to learn. I needed to keep the roof from leaking, for example. Like, these things are a little more critical than the electric light when you're starting out. And I think, unfortunately, architects, interior designers, builders, they have to learn so much about their primary field that there really isn't space left for lighting. And lighting has also changed completely, right? Over the last 10 years, it's completely different. So there's been no chance to catch up. So what do? We do whatever we did on the last project, so long as the client didn't complain about it. Yeah. So you get these mistakes, in essence, that are carried forward. And we mostly illuminate our homes like gas station canopies. We want enough light. We want it bright. We make nice little grids of downlights. But it's not actually human-centric. It's not actually human-friendly. So we have to change the way we think about light.
Yeah, make sure that you can find your way to the candy bar rack and the bathroom in the back and back out to the gas pumps, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
So how does one go about finding a lighting designer and bringing them into the project? Are you hired mostly by architects and other design professionals, or is this something that a client typically brings to their designer or architect with some idea of lighting that's beyond the normal scope?
It's a real mix, Ian. We get projects from architects for sure. We get projects from forward-thinking builders who, and I think that depends regionally. Like there are some regions where the house is the design and construction are really overseen by the architect all the way through to the finish line. And then we do a ton of houses where the architect does some plans and then goes on vacation, right? And the builder is the one who's really responsible for seeing that project through to completion and making the myriad of decisions. So in those cases, we're working with the builder. We do have an increasing number of clients that just find us, right? That just, because of the internet or whatever, because of the blog or whatever, they just find us. And so we get a fair amount of traffic that way. But our biggest way to meet clients is actually through custom home integrators. So the technology specialists, we support them and they have the clients that need better lighting. So if they're coming to a custom home integrator, they're already looking for something better than average. And that gives us an opportunity to deliver better lighting than average.
And when you say custom home integrator, you're talking something even beyond your AV consultant and installer, somebody who's going to connect all the pieces of the home through some kind of computer controlled system, or what is that integration system look like that brings you into these custom homes?
That's a good question. So a few years ago, I didn't know what a custom integrator was. Like I didn't even know they existed. Right? It's like, who are these folks? And they're really home technologists, right? They're whatever technology is in the home. These folks have figured out how to master it. And there's some, what we would call the AV guys out there who do speakers and TVs.
Right.
Integrators are like a step above. It's like there are. Well, this. There are builders and then there are builders, right?
Sure.
There are builders that listen to this podcast who are trying to make things better, who are building better houses. Right. It's the same in AV. So there's folks who are hanging TVs and putting in a few speakers, and then there are custom home integrators, and they will do televisions and home theaters and speakers and all of those things, but they're also taking care of your network. They're taking care of security. They're taking care of lighting control, and now they're taking care of the lighting fixtures involved in the project as well, so that it all works together in a seamless way.
What kind of projects do you get that are most exciting for you and your team?
So that's an easy question to answer because as a designer, the most exciting project is the one you're just starting. Like it's always whatever's next, right? So we've done some crazy projects like, escape rooms on cruise ships, houses themed like Hawaiian temples, on the beach, like it's just some crazy stuff. But I think for us, it's always the next one. We're always like, oh, wow, we get to meet a new couple, another builder we haven't worked with yet or something like that. And we get to try this new house. And where is it? Oh, I haven't designed in that community before. Like what's important. And I think we're just voracious consumers of new opportunities to be creative and solve problems. So I'm going to say the next one.
Do you see that as that all of it is opportunity and it's a blank slate, just waiting for you guys to come in and throw ideas at it and put your stamp on the project?
What's the alternative?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think so, Ian. I think we see everything as opportunity. A lot of the projects aren't opportunities, and if they're not opportunities, they're primarily opportunities because there isn't a willingness to learn a little bit about how lighting can help them, live better lives. If there's no willingness to do things differently, then we shouldn't be involved. Because we're not going to, in other words, don't hire us for downlights.
Right.
If you just need a grid of downlights, you don't need a lighting designer. But if you're willing to do things differently, then come to us. And that can be any project.
That makes me think back to when you first contacted me after seeing some of the other Fine Homebuilding content that I'd put out. You were talking about trying to engage regular builders, maybe subdivision type builders. How was that experience in trying to get kind of the regular builder to be interested in lighting?
So in some sense, I've given up, Ian, right? Like the production builder out there has a certain set of metrics that they have to meet to be able to build 2,000 homes in a year, right?
Or 40,000.
Or 40,000 homes, right? So it's just mind-blowing, the quantity that these folks do. And they have to, the system has to be completely repeatable. It has to be, check, the homeowner has to be able to go to a website, check 6 boxes, and it's done, right? Like that's all the design decisions that need to be made. And honestly, I think, we're doing a show home with I would call a semi-custom builder, right? So not a true production builder. Maybe they only do 30 homes a year. We're doing a show home with them right now as a test bed to say, okay, well, here's the upgrade. You can come to the show home and you can see the lighting upgrade and check the box, add 25 grand to the project, total project cost, and you will get this lighting upgrade. And it's pretty good lighting. It's not, fantastic lighting, but it's easy, and it's easy for then the builder to quantify and add into the cost of the home. So we're trying to do that. But honestly, I think we have to change the consumer. The consumer has to demand it if it's going to move into a production home. Because there's no incentive otherwise for a production home builder to change what they're doing. If it's working and it's profitable, what's the point in changing, right? So I think consumers demand shiplap and granite counters or whatever it is that is the hot trend of the moment. At some point, we've got to figure out how to make lighting like true lighting, not just decorative fixtures, but really good lighting. We've got to make that a baseline that consumers demand.
Yeah, it can be challenging from the position of a value add contractor. I found that when I was in business for myself with a custom architectural woodworking shop, that my goods and services were not really necessary. So you end up kind of being something that feels like window dressing, and you're always waiting for somebody to call you up and say, yeah, we don't have that 25 grand, forget about that, we're gonna move on to something different. So that can be pretty challenging when you're trying to educate customers about what you can offer and how that can enhance the product that they're purchasing.
And that ties back to the language of light that I've sort of been trying to develop. Like that's, if the consumer can understand it and know what to ask for, then we can potentially change it. And I think, as I've been thinking about this recently, like how do we really get better lighting into the hands of the average consumer or the average homeowner? We have to make lighting design, I have to be obsolete. Lighting designers have to be obsolete because they can't afford to hire us for their project. Like it's going to cost you $10, $15, $20, $50, $100,000 just to hire a designer, let alone put all the lighting in it. And the budget on the house is $800 or something, crazy small for lighting. So we have to figure out how to become irrelevant and let give the consumer enough knowledge that they can ask for better.
So what spaces are the most challenging to light?
The most challenging spaces to light are spaces where the soffit is too small. Like if you've got a tray, for example, a tray ceiling, and it's that soffit is too shallow, so you can't get a recessed light in it to hit the art. And if you put it in the higher ceiling, it hits the edge of the soffit. Like that's one of the most challenging kind. And the second one I would say is pitched spaces with pitched ceilings. So cathedral ceilings. Yeah. We light the walls. Like we light things on the walls. We light art on the walls, textures, finishes, all those kinds of things. We light it on the wall. And when you have a peaked roof, when you have a cathedral ceiling, you can get, sloped ceiling downlights that will light the floor well, but I really don't care about the floor. The floor will be well lit by the stuff that bounces off the important things in the room. But it's really almost, I would say in most cases, it's impossible to get a recessed light that will come out of a sloped ceiling and then do 180 degrees and illuminate a piece of art on the wall. So that's a challenge. I mean, we have ways to do it, but most of our clients don't want to see any lighting fixtures. And it's sort of like, well, okay, that's impossible. Like I can't light that art without you seeing a fixture.
Hey, you just described the great room of my house, which has a cathedral ceiling that I think is maybe 18 feet at the peak. And we just did basic disc lights. And the reason I picked those was, I know, yeah, yeah. He's
No.
So the reason I picked them was because they get mounted in regular boxes, so I could have my electrician put in boxes that could have other light fixtures on them should we choose to do that at a later date, knowing that at that point in the build process, as soon as my electrician showed me the disc light and said, I can get these for like $5, I was like, sold. Give me all of those and then we can do something different. And I remember the first time I turned them on for my wife, she was like, what the hell did you do? Terrible. And I was like, well, and I tried to explain to her why I did it, but I have noticed that oftentimes when it gets dark out, uh, we don't turn the lights on, or we turn them on so soft that it doesn't really do much for you. And I'm talking to you now, I'm starting to think through like, wow, because it's just shooting straight down at the floor from a pretty high elevation. Is there any light fixture that you would suggest I look at for maybe doing that better?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good thing that you have the junction boxes up there, right? And it's actually probably easier to fix than it would have than if you had
Right.
put in recessed downlights. So I think you made the right call in that in terms of like future, future flexibility. Believe it or not, we will use track lighting sometimes, and we'll use monopoints, which are essentially like spotlights on a canopy. So you put it on the junction box, and then it's an adjustable spotlight, like a single track head, and you can aim those in different ways. Now, there's quite a bit of difference in the quality of those fixtures and what they can do. When you're up, so if you've got an 18-foot peak, if you're up 16 or 15 feet, then we want to have a pretty tight beam spread to hit the things that we want to hit down below. So that's going to be, you're going to have to step up a grade, I think, in the fixtures that you use. And sometimes we'll use little pendants, like really small ones, just to get the light down more comfortable. Because humans, like the light up above, if it's really bright up above, the closest thing we have in nature to that is the sun. And we hate it so much that we put on hats. Like it's just not comfortable, right? We put sunglasses on, we put hats on, visors, whatever. Our eyes are sunk back into our heads because it's like just biologically not good. And that's typically where the only light in a room is in that no zone, right? In that glare zone. So getting it and aiming it at the walls, or, I think there's ways you can solve it.
You have any other advice for regular homeowners like myself who made poor lighting decisions when they were remodeling or building? Maybe there's some easy to execute upgrades that any regular handy person that owns a house could take care of?
Well, you can get good light bulbs. If you've got fixtures that, lamps or chandeliers, you can get good light bulbs, especially warm dimming light bulbs, and put them on a dimmer, and that's going to help. But really, if you want to fix something with as minimal work as possible, then get 4 lamps with nice soft shades and adjustable height, so you can lower them to where you can't see the bulb when you're sitting down. Like that reduces the glare. You'll get soft light in direction. You'll get indirect light. You'll get light for your hands. You really can do a smaller space with lamps, and you can do a double height space, a tall space. If you have a couple of lamps, it's going to be phenomenally more comfortable. So it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't really have to be hard.
I think that's an overlooked option in lamps, especially when you're talking about things that are in design that are remodels. It's not intuitive to automatically go, well, you could put a lamp there and that would give you the proper lighting. I think you're always thinking about the integrated solution that's hardwired into the project.
Well, I think trendy, when people go and they do Pinterest or whatever and they look up projects, like lamps get in the way of the photography. So I think they pull them all out whenever they're shooting a space. So we don't see them. It's like, oh, that must be like old, 1980s or whatever. Like we don't want lamps. Lamps can be incredibly useful in any style home. There's a lamp to fit every style, and they can really solve problems.
So tell us about your house. How well lit is your house?
Miserably. Well, here's what I do. I'm sort of an inveterate home remodeler, right? So I like the old neighborhoods in towns, which means I'm always buying a house that has horrible, cracked plaster and, beautiful hardwood floors, but terrible lighting, one receptacle in every 6 rooms, they're a pain in the neck. So what I tend to do is I tend to start my way through remodeling, so, my first house I did the kitchen and it was beautiful, and then I did our primary bedroom suite and it was great, and then I was getting ready to do, the kids' rooms, and we sold the house and moved. Right. And so we bought another house, and then I was like, okay, well, this time I'm going to do the bathroom. And so I did the bathroom, and then I was like, I'm going to do this space and I do that space. And then we sell the house and move. So I never really get to enjoy an entire home's worth of good lighting. So I have great lighting right here in my home office because I work from home. So I have really good lighting here because I need it. I'm here all day. And during the pandemic, I put color tunable lighting in our bedroom so it can shift the white. It's tunable white. I can shift that. And I got to tell you, that's pretty awesome. I don't think I'll go back now that we have that in there. And then I've got sort of a crazy amount of LED tape light in various places. Like, it's so easy to use that stuff and hide it behind a counter or on top of a cabinet or wherever, that we've got some pretty surprising places where that really helps soften a dark corner, for example, and bring some really soft, smooth, indirect light into the space. So like behind shelves, even shining up, stuff like that.
Well, David, it's been great having you on the show. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell or ask our audience before we go?
I would say for the audience, if you can take a little bit of time to dig past task ambient accent, take a little bit of time to dig past 4 cans and a fan in a bedroom, or just a bunch of circles on a plan. There is a better way to do lighting. And if any of your homes, any of your projects are occupied after sunset, then it's very, very critical to get the lighting right. And I think for most of us, like, we work during the day, we build during the day, we photograph during the day, and our homeowners spend more time there at night. So we've got to figure out how to make that half of the experience, out that major, critical, important part of the experience, better for them. And we can, and you can start small, but I think we can do better.
That's a different perspective, thinking about your client spending more time in the home at night as opposed to when you're there as a designer working with them during the day, or there as a builder working with them during the day.
Yeah, I think if more builders built, and architects worked overnight, we would have different lighting, because you would have, looked at those disc lights and been like, yeah, there's got to be a better way, 10 projects ago.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you for taking the time to join me today. And thanks to everybody for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us wherever you're listening. It helps others find the podcast. Thanks, David, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ian.